On a day when most celebrities were posting cheerful tributes to their fathers or celebrating fatherhood with smiles and nostalgia, Justin Bieber broke the pattern with a message that stunned his fans and echoed far beyond the entertainment world. On June 16th, the global pop star took to social media to share a hauntingly honest confession. Father's Day had left him feeling traumatized. The word wasn't buried in a long caption or masked by euphemism. It stood alone, raw and unfiltered. It was not a headline crafted for attention, but a glimpse into something unresolved and deeply personal. In a culture where fame often demands curated joy, Bieber's vulnerability disrupted the feed with rare emotional clarity. It wasn't a glossy family photo or a throwback memory. It was pain, typed out in real time, and it struck a chord. For many, the word traumatized sparked speculation about his relationship with his father, about his own fears of becoming a parent, or about the long shadows cast by a childhood spent under constant scrutiny. Bieber's bond with his father, Jeremy Bieber, has long been public but complicated. Over the years, interviews and lyrics have hinted at abandonment, reconciliation, and tension, yet the full story has remained largely behind closed doors. Now, with a single word, Bieber pulled the curtain back, just far enough for the world to feel the weight he still carries. Fans, journalists, and mental health advocates took immediate notice. Some offered support, others tried to analyze. But what united everyone was the understanding that this was not about celebrity drama, it was about emotional truth. At 30 years old, Bieber is no longer the teen idol with floppy hair and tween anthems. He's a man who has lived through addiction scares, public breakdowns, tabloid storms, and spiritual awakenings. He's married, he's healing, and he's grown. But clearly, some wounds still ache. And this post, made quietly on a day meant for celebration, reminded everyone that healing is not linear, that fame doesn't protect from familial hurt, and that even those with millions of followers can feel alone on the days that matter most. The timing of his message couldn't have been more symbolic. It came during a cultural shift where more men, especially public figures, are speaking up about emotional pain and mental health. But Bieber's honesty hit differently, not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet, sudden, and utterly real. It wasn't polished or explained. It was simply released, like a sigh he couldn't hold in any longer. And in that sigh, millions heard their own stories. As fans around the world reacted, with concern, with empathy, with shared pain, it became clear that this wasn't just Justin Bieber's moment of vulnerability. It was a mirror, one that reminded us that even the brightest stars carry shadows. And sometimes, the bravest thing they can do is name them. Beneath the surface, Justin Bieber's simple confession on Father's Day revealed a much deeper and more enduring internal conflict, one that has haunted him for most of his life, just beneath the glossy veneer of fame. While the world watched him rise from a YouTube sensation to a global superstar, what many failed to see was the fractured boy behind the curtain, growing up under the relentless pressure of millions of eyes, all while navigating a complex and often painful relationship with his father. Jeremy Bieber was absent for parts of Justin's early life, a fact the singer has alluded to in interviews and lyrics over the years. Though they've reconciled at times, attending events together, appearing in family photos, their bond has remained strained, marked by distance, past hurt, and the heavy burden of public perception. Growing up without a stable father figure, while simultaneously becoming the sole provider for his family as a teenager, created a dynamic that was both empowering and emotionally destabilizing for Justin. He became a commodity before he became a man, with a father who at times seemed more like a fan than a guide. In past interviews, Bieber spoke about his struggles with trust, control, and the feeling of being used. Sentiments that many fans now see reflected in his Father's Day post. The trauma he referred to is likely not tied to one singular event, but to the compounded weight of unmet expectations, inconsistent support, and the absence of emotional safety when he needed it most. The conflict only deepened as Justin entered adulthood. His personal battles, substance abuse, anger issues, depression, were magnified by a media culture eager to sensationalize every misstep. At moments when he might have turned to a strong paternal figure, he was instead surrounded by enablers, critics, and a world that demanded constant performance. His reconciliation with Jeremy in recent years appeared genuine, but insiders suggest that years of emotional damage left scars that were never fully addressed. Becoming a husband to Hailey Baldwin has pushed Justin toward healing, therapy, and spiritual growth. But Father's Day reawakened an emotional minefield. It wasn't just about his dad. It was about everything he missed, everything he feared, and everything he's still trying to rebuild within himself. This conflict is amplified by the very nature of Bieber's fame. For over a decade, he has lived under extreme visibility. Yet his most intimate struggles remained misunderstood or dismissed. His vulnerability has often been labeled as weakness, his silence misread as indifference. But what the world now sees, perhaps more clearly than ever, is a man trying to reconcile with a childhood he never truly got to live. The trauma he referenced is the kind that lingers, not from a single blow, but from years of emotional absence, unmet needs, and the unrelenting pressure to keep smiling when your heart is breaking. And now, for the first time in a long time, Bieber isn't hiding the cracks. He's pointing to them, naming them, and in doing so, exposing the invisible battles that fame could never fix. And then, something shifted. In the hours after Justin Bieber's confession, the internet transformed from a space of speculation into one of unexpected vulnerability and collective release. His single-word post became a lightning rod for emotional honesty, sparking thousands of fans and fellow celebrities to open up about their own complicated relationships with fatherhood, both as children and as parents. What began as a cryptic message turned into a cultural reckoning. Hashtags like Such Your Father Wound and Such Your Healing with Justin began trending as people from around the world, many of them men, shared deeply personal stories about estrangement, absence, forgiveness, and pain. It was as if Bieber's voice had given them permission to admit what they long kept inside. That Father's Day, for all its cheerful cards and idealized memories, can be a day of mourning just as much as celebration. Within this surge of emotion, public figures began to weigh in. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson wrote about losing his own father and the emotional walls he had to tear down as a result. Actor Terry Crews spoke of the need for emotional literacy among men, thanking Bieber for breaking silence with strength. For years, his story had been hijacked by headlines. DUI arrests, controversial tattoos, hasty apologies, broken relationships. But now, he was reclaiming authorship through vulnerability. And the world, rather than mock him, leaned in. This was not the climax of a scandal. It was the peak of a truth bomb, detonated with quiet courage. The man who had once seemed lost in the noise of fame had gone silent, and in that silence, told the most powerful story of his life. And perhaps, by doing so, he gave others permission to begin telling their own. Not with perfect grammar or viral polish, but with the broken, beautiful honesty that healing demands. In the quiet that followed, the world began to process what Justin Bieber had just done, and what it meant not only for him, but for a broader cultural shift around emotional expression, particularly in men. His raw acknowledgement of trauma, especially on a day so charged with tradition and sentimentality, reframed how we think about vulnerability in public figures. For years, Justin has been both celebrated and dissected, idolized and ridiculed, but through this simple, aching moment of truth, he achieved something few global icons ever do. He became universally human. No longer just the headline or the hitmaker, he became the mirror, one that reflected back to millions the unspoken pain they carry, especially around fatherhood, identity, and emotional inheritance. His courage created space. And in that space, others began to breathe a little easier, speak a little louder, and feel a little less alone. As the digital noise settled, Bieber's message remained, not as trending content, but as a seed planted in the collective consciousness. Conversations began unfolding in homes, in therapy rooms, in group chats and school circles, where sons talked to fathers, and fathers finally listened. People revisited their own relationships with masculine emotion, long taught to suppress and ignore, and realized that healing wasn't weakness. It was the very definition of strength. Bieber didn't offer solutions, and he didn't need to. What he offered was presence. And that presence, unguarded and uncurated, became a template for emotional honesty that transcends music, fame, or even Father's Day itself. Behind the scenes, sources close to Bieber shared that he's been doing intensive emotional work, therapy, journaling, spiritual mentorship, not to prepare for a project, but to prepare for peace. Those who know him say this new version of Justin isn't about reinvention, it's about integration. The child star, the broken rebel, the spiritual seeker, the husband, and now the wounded son, all coexisting within a man who no longer needs to compartmentalize to survive. There are whispers that this emotional chapter will inform his next album, with songs less about charts and more about truth. But even if he never writes a note about it, his silence has already become a song, one of grief, reckoning, and unexpected hope. Ultimately, Bieber's Father's Day confession wasn't a collapse. It was a breakthrough. A quiet revolution against the expectation that men, especially famous men, must mask their pain behind performance. In showing his fracture, he demonstrated real strength. In choosing truth over polish, he modeled something rare, public healing. And in letting himself feel, publicly and without shame, he did more than reclaim a painful memory. He redefined what courage looks like in 2025. It doesn't wear armor, it wears scars. And it tells the truth anyway. In this new light, Justin Bieber is no longer just a star trying to find his way. He's a survivor, learning to stand still. And in that stillness, a generation listens.